Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Kim Turner Podcast. Thank you so much for making our first and inaugural episode a hit and liking and subscribing. Continue to do so on YouTube or wherever, and download wherever you enjoy your podcast. Let's get right into it. Our third episode, we're going to talk about dispatch priming. You may or may not have heard of this concept, and I just kind of want to go over it and review it a little bit, and we'll continue the conversation. I would like to thank Inside Edition for this 911 clip that we're going to listen to. Then we're going to discuss this concept of priming.
Okay, 911 was emergency.
My mom, she's really bad. She hasn't been out of the bed in like 3 days. She's turning yellow, and she's laying in the bed like making noises.
Kelly Tichnell made that urgent 911 call, trying desperately to send an ambulance for her 54-year-old mom, Diana Kronk. But she says the response from the 911 dispatcher shocked her.
We need to get her to a hospital.
Okay, is she willing to go to the hospital?
She will be, because I'm on my way there. She's going.
Okay.
Or she's going to die.
Okay, we can't force her to go in an ambulance.
Okay, well, can we just try?
Okay, how about calling us back to make sure she's willing to go before we send resources out there in case she says no?
Okay.
Okay, and then as long as she's willing to go, we'll get you an ambulance out there. And
Kelly made the call while driving to her mom's house in Sycamore, Pennsylvania. When she arrived 10 minutes later, her mom was in bad shape. But Kelly had no cell service and couldn't call 911 back. She died the next morning from internal bleeding.
We were begging for help. And for somebody to be on the other end of that phone and decide that he's God for that day, that is unacceptable.
Now the 911 dispatcher, Leon Price, has been charged with involuntary manslaughter after failing to send an ambulance.
We feel that if emergency services were dispatched, as we allege they should have been, that Diana Kronk would have survived.
My mom should still be here. My life is forever ruined because of a decision he made.
So many of us, as 911 dispatchers, 911 first responders, will listen to this call, and our first and immediate thought is a policy violation. Well, this could or could not have been a policy violation. And again, remember, when we listen to these calls, we're not here to cast judgment or aspersions. We're here to really to learn. And part of this conversation is, what is priming? And the definition, when we think about priming and what is it, it is literally, the plain definition is how the information given to first responders may set a certain expectation or bias before they arrive on scene. I want to pull out just the word bias here. When we listen to that audio tape, that dispatcher made a decision, whether it was unconscious or conscious. The bias would be the previous experience he had with these types of medical services calls. I want you to just think about that and ponder that for a moment. The other part of this is that bias may or may not be negative. Expectations we set for officers in the field may or may not be negative. I don't want us to be defensive when we have these conversations. When we think about the term dispatch priming, often we think that it's something negative or something we did wrong. Unfortunately, in this example, there was a really poor and the worst outcome possible. We have to take a moment to think about the authority, the scope of authority we have in our positions, and really how we navigate and move through that space when we're working. We're people. We're human beings. How are our internal biases influencing positively or negatively the calls for service that we're receiving? That's the open-ended question that I want to ask to all of you. And then, of course, for those training coordinators or those who are interested in training, we actually teach a really phenomenal 8-hour course on this topic. And it has received overwhelmingly positive feedback, so much so that many agencies are requiring all of their dispatch staff to attend the class. And it's been recommended to be a part of basic training for the first year when you're in dispatch. So I just want to take a moment here, and I also, for our guest today, will be speaking with an officer because of the idea of priming. is how are we influencing our field first responders? Who better to have a conversation with than the person on the other end of the radio and their perceptions of the information flow and how they receive the calls from us, whether it's typed in CAD or whether it's voice dispatched. So I'm excited to have a good friend who's also a police officer give a perspective from the field, Corporal Ken Hardesty with David's Police Department. So Ken, thank you for joining me. You're on the 3rd episode of the podcast, so I'm super excited about that, man. And I'd like for you just to introduce yourself to the audience, a little bit about your background and your present assignment.
Sure. I've been in police work for 27 years, the bulk of that with the City of San Jose Police Department, about 19 years down there. And I'm currently assigned as the training coordinator / police corporal with the City of Davis Police Department, which is in the Sacramento region of California.
Yeah, / means you do a lot of work you're not paid for.
Correct. Well, yeah, ancillary or other duties as assigned, I think is what the policy says.
There you go.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we've talked about, this relatively new concept, well, that we're teaching about, I don't know if it's a new concept, called dispatch priming. And I'd love to get your perspective from being in the field, your understanding of priming and how or when it occurs, but really what the effect is in patrol. And as a sergeant, I know you monitor the calls, you hear everything that's going out, so you have a pulse on what's happening globally, right, in the city. So what are your thoughts on this idea of dispatch priming?
Well, I mean, I think it's always existed. It's just one of those things that's becoming, it's coming around where technology and science and a multitude of other topics are allowing us to realize that it actually exists. And I think it works both ways. Priming is pretty much a self-explanatory word. It's setting up the context of a call or an incident before, emergency services arrive. And that could include, something as subtle as a dispatcher's voice inflection or tone on the radio, or, as field personnel, patrol personnel, us, for lack of a better word, jacking ourselves up based on experience or, the type of call it is, or, hesitancy to respond to it, the unknown going into it. All those things play a factor. And I think, one entity on either side of the radio, meaning the dispatcher or the field units, can alter the overall course of that call by simple voice inflection or tone on the radio.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you mentioned something I think we don't talk about a lot, which is the idea that other units, other officers in the field, based on their response, can also prime other units that are responding.
Oh, absolutely. I would say, over the course of my career, the overwhelming majority of the dispatchers that I've had have been the utmost professionals, and it's generally not them that lose, or not lose, I guess I should say create a chaotic environment on the radio. It's typically the officers that are responding. I've been involved in multiple times where, people have gotten other people amped up simply by the way they're talking or not talking on the radio.
As you were saying that, I naturally go back and start thinking of a million years ago when I was a boot and in an FTO program. And,
Can you remember that far back, Kim?
Yeah, man. The Rolodex is spinning. So only people over 40 even know what a Rolodex is.
I was just going to say, when I teach, I talk about the brain being similar to a Rolodex, and a lot of times I get a blank stare from, younger people in the crowd because they don't know what a Rolodex. I have to go back and explain what a Rolodex actually is.
So I'm going through the contact list in my head for everybody with a smartphone, right? But you hit on something that I think might be a training gap. And it's just simply this. I had the great fortune of being a dispatcher first and becoming a police officer. So mic fright was a non-issue because I had already dealt with that as a dispatcher. I also had an advantage because I was a dispatcher, so I knew to take a breath before I got on the air when I really wanted to scream, right?
Right.
But I think there may be a training gap that as FTOs, as we could talk about, is are we really teaching our new trainees how to calm themselves in that millisecond before they hit the transmit key, right, before they get on the air. Because I don't think ever in my entire career as a police officer did we ever have a conversation about how to maintain, or I would say, are we priming each other? I know I've never had that conversation. Like, am I jacking you up? We clown each other. We clown. Every department has that officer, right? That they could be going code 7 or going out to lunch, and it sounds like they're being murdered. Like, every department has that person.
Correct.
But I think on a larger scale, from a training perspective, like, what are your thoughts about? Is there a gap in training in the field training program? Is that something the academies could be addressing in role playing?
Yeah, and there are, speaking of the academy specifically, there are academies in California, and I'll throw a bone out to Stanislaus County Sheriff's Department. They run a phenomenal academy, and instead of doing the bulk of the learning domains, I think there's now 43 learning domains in a regular basic course at 6 months. Instead of delivering that material predominantly in the classroom, they are one of the few, two that I know of, that run as basically a scenario-based academy where they take the material that's out of the workbook, combine those learning domains into, say, 1 day of training, and the bulk of that material is delivered in a scenario format so that the recruit, trainees, cadets, whatever you choose to call them, are getting that material in a quasi-stressful environment rather than sitting and listening to a lecture, which I think is, is the direction that we should be going. Because you're right. I mean, unless they can sit in a radio procedures class for 8 hours and know what an instructor told them, but unless they're actually physically experiencing it, I'm a firm believer in stress inoculation and simulation or immersion type training where we actually place people in a semi relatable situation to what they're going to face in the field, because I think you get a much better product. So yeah, there's generally always a training gap. I mean, we're always a few steps behind what's currently being presented in the field.
Two things. You said there's a second academy. Would you mind giving a shout out to the second academy?
Yeah, LAPD has been doing something very similar to that. They call it I forget the name of the acronym that they use, but they're basically what LAPD, and I know for Stanislaus County Sheriff's Department does it as well. Like I said, what they do is they take a bulk of courses that would be delivered in a classroom environment. They roll them into a model that's delivered in a scenario-based format, and it's been post-approved. And in speaking with representatives from Stanislaus County Sheriff's Department, they have seen an extremely high successful rate in the FTO program, which, the goal of any police academy in California, any of the 40, I think there's 40 left, their primary goal is to prepare an individual for entry into a field training program, and Stanislaus County Sheriff's Department is seeing a tremendous success rate in the FTO program based on the model that they're using in the academy. So I think especially, not want to say today's recruits, I think all recruits historically have gotten much more out of stress-based or immersion type training where they're actually become inoculated to the types of events that they're going to face in the field, rather than sitting in a classroom and listening to someone talk about it.
Yeah, I would agree. And it makes me harken back to, I was in class 110 in Orange County Sheriff's Academy in 1992. And there were only 14 people in my academy class, which if you're a cop, you know that was a horrific experience. But the positive outcome for that is that we actually did scenario training. We doubled the amount of scenario training because of the small number of recruits. And every single person that graduated went to a department was successful in their FTO program.
Right.
And I'm a firm believer that you're 100% right. You hit the nail on the head. And I also want to give a nod to you as a trainer, because when you were at San Jose Police Department and involved in training for the department, San Jose was really, in my opinion, in the forefront of including dispatchers in that stress training specific to active shooter training. And I specifically remember being a part of that where you help design training where dispatchers, we were not bystanders. We were actually put on teams so that we could understand what the officers had to feel and deal with and threat analysis. And I, as a former officer, appreciated it. But I could tell you as a dispatcher, I truly valued that training. And I know that it elevated the performance of myself and my peers because it speaks to exactly what you're talking about. We could talk about it, but until I experience it, until I see what my counterparts are managing and dealing with, it really elevates my performance as a 911 dispatcher. So I just want to give you your flowers, Ken, because you were 12 years ahead. I mean, like now agencies are just now figuring out maybe we need to include dispatchers.
Right.
You really were on the cutting edge. I believe it was you and Daniel Hawes, if I remember correctly.
Daniel was one of them. He's since retired. There were a few people that were involved in that. Kevin Wren, I remember specifically, was around then. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, so I got to give you your flowers because you deserve it, man.
That was a fun time. Was that over at Old City Hall, I think, probably?
Yes, it was. Yeah. It was exactly in Old City Hall. I remember like it was yesterday. So it was good times. Good times. With that, while we sort of on this platform, and given your experience in a very large agency to a medium-sized agency, and as a patrol sergeant, if you only had one sort of piece of advice in the context of this, of priming, whether it's to patrol or to dispatch, what would that be?
Well, I appreciate the promotion, but I haven't earned it. I'm only a corporal. I'm not a sergeant.
Sorry, my apologies.
Okay, I'll take it. Maybe you can call my lieutenant when we're done and get the pay that goes along with that. But
there we go.
Corporals
Those other duties is assigned.
Or the other duties is assigned. Corporals do work patrol, and they are watch commanders at times. So, you're asking for a specific example? Is that my understanding?
No, just what, like, if you had any advice, like, what would that advice be? Because you have all this experience, Ken. Like, seriously, I know that you drop golden nuggets of wisdom, whether you realize it or not. You do.
Well, I can tell you, and in both agencies, and I don't mean this to be disparaging in any way, shape, or form. My experience is that a lot of times junior or less senior personnel want to be on the radio far more than people who have a few years on. And so one of the things that I've done here as a patrol corporal is if I go out to a call with a patrol team, or in the past when I would go out to calls with a patrol team, I would tell them, hey, you go handle the call, I'll handle the radio. And that does a few different things. Number one, it prevents some information that may not be pertinent from being broadcast. But number two, and more importantly, they are listening to what I am choosing to put out or not to put out, and at what point do I put that out. And it also allows them to go handle the call and not have to worry about the radio because that's been taken care of. But over and above all of that, by listening to what a senior officer, not necessarily myself, but what a senior officer would put out and when they would put that out, is modeling behavior. And in any type of training environment, or even, just going to a call, less senior or junior officers are constantly being trained, right? And so what I try and encourage people to do is model good behavior or show what good looks like, right? So if I'm not putting out a broadcast every 5 or 10 seconds, then it's demonstrating to the next generation of people that may not necessarily be necessary. There's certain information that needs to go out, and there's certain information that doesn't. And, in a city like this where you have a patrol team of 5 people and that's it for that particular shift, one of the things that I've tried to, is there's a time and place for everything. And if your entire patrol team is here and you're constantly putting out updates, there's no one else coming that needs that information. Everybody that's going to help you is already here, right? So there's a time and place. There's certain things that need to go into the CAT event. There's certain things that need to be broadcast and dispatchers need to know, but there's a time and place for that. And if your entire patrol team is on scene, there's nobody else coming to help you. So those updates are just kind of for you. And it sometimes, especially if you're working something of a, modified perimeter and you don't have line of sight with the person that's hearing that, even though they're there, your voice inflection and the way things are broadcast or put out can certainly affect the emotions of somebody who doesn't have eyes on you. They might be on the same call as you, but they can't see you. So, I've tried in the past to go, look, you guys go handle the call. I'll pick up the end and I'll watch what's going on, and I will broadcast what needs to go out on the radio, and stay off of it, essentially. So, priming is a big deal, I think, because for a lot of different reasons, but especially in today's society where, police work, and most cases rightfully so, everything is scrutinized to a degree where it wasn't necessarily in the past. And so you may be called to task as to why you broadcast something on the radio or why you broadcast it in a certain way. And then, psychologically, did that change the context or the outcome of the event? So to try and minimize that, I think it's, if you have one person, like the old adage of one person is given directions to a suspect, then maybe one person should be designated to handle the radio, and who that is or why could be call dependent. But, all those things come into play down the road when you're held to task or called to answer as to why a specific event or incident or call for service went the direction it did. And was this a factor in your decision making? And I think 9 times out of 10, the answer is probably going to be yes.
I told you that you would drop gems, and I think you probably solved. No, I think you probably solved the conundrum that every officer faces: is why did you break the perimeter?
Right.
I think if we were actually to do a data set and a scientific study, I 100% believe that the hypothesis that they heard information that primed them to do that would probably turn out to be true.
Right.
Yeah. Well, what a brilliant observation.
So,
I know you're a humble guy. This is my job. It's my job to give you your flowers, dude. So I want to end it like this because I really like this question. And I've asked it for the guests that have been on, so I'm going to ask you. If you had to describe yourself and you could only use a type code or a call type, what would it be?
Describe myself with a type code or a type call.
Or a call type. But what would it be? Don't overthink it. Just what comes first to mind.
1066.
There you go. I love it. Suspicious subject.
Yeah.
For all my folks who don't know what that is. So Ken, thank you, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation. I look forward to having you come back on. We're going to break down a call together sometime in the future. That'd be awesome.
Okay, perfect.
All right, listen, you have a wonderful afternoon. I'll talk to you later.
Okay, Kim, you too.
All right, thanks, man.
Okay, bye-bye.
I'm really excited about this last part and the things that we're going to do as we grow as a podcast. And for those of you who know me in this space, who know me as a first responder, I'm really passionate about the work that we do. And I also know that many of my brothers and sisters have staffing shortages, and also really finding a space for recruitment. So without further ado, I'm excited to share a recruitment video from Montebello Police Department in Los Angeles County. So for all of those who are interested in starting a career as a dispatcher, thinking about lateraling as a dispatcher, and really are looking for a place to call home, let's check out this recruitment video from Montebello Police Department.
I think that it's important to realize that you're helping the community. You're the first voice that the community hears when they call for help. My name is Stacy Smith. I am the dispatch supervisor for the Montebello Police Department.
The most rewarding part of my job is being able to help the community and making sure all of my officers get home safe. The moment the phone rings, everything else that's going on in the room, everything else going out, my personal life, goes out the window, and I'm 100% engaged in that phone call.
I feel like anybody looking for a rewarding career, but more importantly, a place that they can call home, the Montebello Police Department is the place to be.
As cliche as it is to say that we are a family, we truly are.
So be sure to like, follow, and subscribe Montebello Police Department. And if you're a department who is struggling with recruitment, be sure to hit me on an email. It's one of the specialties. I'll be more than happy to help you with that recruitment plan and also developing a recruitment video so you could tap in to the resources that you need to help solve your hiring crisis. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on YouTube at Kim Turner LLC and on the gram at The Kim Turner. I look forward to seeing you guys for the next episode. In the meantime, stay safe and stay well.